The International Newsnet World Report is a national television news show available in more than 30 million homes. We broadcast daily real news the networks won't tell you. We are solely viewer-supported. That means you. You can donate at our website, INNWorldReport.net. We hope you find the following interview informative and helpful.
In an about-face, the National Institute for Standards and Technology has admitted that its 10,000-page report on the destruction of the Twin Towers is, let's say, not accurate. In a recent reply to family members Bill Doyle and Bob McIlvaine, scientists Stephen Jones and Kevin Ryan, architect Richard Gage, and the group Scholars for 9/11 Truth, NIST states we are unable to provide a full explanation of the total collapse. Thus, NIST admits that its 10,000-page report on the towers does not even pretend to provide any explanation whatsoever for the towers' total collapse. To tell us more, we're joined on the phone by Kevin Ryan, who's one of the founders of Scholars for 9/11 Truth. Welcome to the International Newsnet, Kevin.
Thanks, Lenny. It's good to be here.
Kevin, let's get a little history. When did you send, along with the others, when did you send this letter to NIST, and what was the purpose of the letter?
Well, our group filed this request for correction with NIST in April of this year. And the purpose was to, first of all, give the American people a chance to hopefully analyze the computer models and the calculations that NIST has produced at taxpayer expense. We are also hoping that Bob McIlvaine and Bill Doyle can someday get a scientifically sound explanation for why each of their sons died in the towers. And as for the others, myself, I lost a job questioning this report. Dr. Jones and Dr. Legg are both researchers who rely on accurate data for continuing their research. Richard Gage is an architect who is going to be interested in how these results impact future building design. But largely the request for correction is something that states that NIST violated what's called the Data Quality Act and also the information quality standards of objectivity, utility, and integrity that a government agency like NIST is required to uphold. And there are laws then that require them to produce reports that can be useful and where independent researchers can reproduce the results of the experiments that they perform. And so what we found is that the report, which is based entirely on computer simulations, is really absurd within itself, very self-contradictory. Now, the reason that it's based entirely on computer simulations to begin with is that NIST did do physical testing. Over a period of years, they did a number of physical tests and found that those tests would not support the fire-induced collapse hypothesis for the towers that they were really looking to support. And so ultimately, they had to put everything into these computer simulations. So we go through, even on that playing field, we go through and find that the computer itself will not produce results that support the fire-induced collapse hypothesis. There are several sections to our request for correction, and I can go through those. But we did receive a response from NIST just about a month ago, almost a month ago. And so with each part of this request for correction, we state this is the problem, and then NIST comes back with a response and says, this is why we're not going to comply with your request, and we're not going to change anything in our report. So we start with the first part of our request for correction, which asks NIST, why would they reject all the less severe damage estimates in the base case estimates of damage that they had originally stated would be part of their experiments? Because ultimately they not only based everything on computer simulations, but in those computer simulations, they relied entirely on what they call more severe damage estimates and stress estimates within the buildings. So we asked them, why did they do that? Why did they reject all these less severe estimates and even the base estimates? And this responded that, first of all, if they had done so, if they had used the less severe estimates, that would not have resulted in building collapse. which is, of course, a circular argument. Their charter was to tell us why and how these buildings collapsed, all three buildings. And so far we've gotten one report that is just a report of initiation for collapse of the towers and no report on World Trade Center 7. But for them to say they're going to reject all the less severe damage estimates because it would not have resulted in collapse is, again, a circular argument. They also say that the less severe damage estimates did not meet certain key observables. For example, no debris exited the side opposite the impact. But if you look at their report, we find that even for the severe case, no debris exited the side opposite impact. So, they've got an argument that defeats itself within their own report.
How did NIST actually address the collapse itself after collapse initiation?
Well, they didn't. They didn't address it at all, Lenny, and actually that's something that when they first put their report out, they didn't make much comment on. And then when they last year had to submit to us responses to frequently asked questions, they got a little more candid with us and started to tell us the truth a little bit. And now with this response to our RFC, they've simply come right out and said that even their computer models don't converge on a solution, which means that they can't even get to collapse initiation, let alone the dynamics of collapse. They don't even attempt to explain the dynamics of collapse. So yeah, all of the features of the collapse, the sudden onset of the failure, the near freefall speed, the symmetrical collapse, not to mention all the eyewitness testimonies to explosions and flashes of light, the small rubble piles, relatively small rubble piles of molten metal and so forth, they can ignore all of that because they state that they're only talking about the point at which the buildings are poised for collapse. They won't go into the evidence that relates to the actual collapse itself. And in their frequently asked questions response of last year, just before the 5th anniversary of